Yay! It's Tuesday, kind of like a Monday. February 20th. We're back in school, except for those kids that are dead or broken or crippled. And so there's a new piece of paper. I went ahead and printed off the ones from my website to make things easier on you. So when you come back, make sure you grab this to help you out. We're going to be using it today for learning stuff. Let's see. Today we get into stories about people making poor choices. My people, I mean God's. Blue sheet will fill in more from that. The book report is due in just over a week for those of you wanting to do the book report. For those of you who've been putting it off, like it's due in the future, and the future is now. I mean, still the future's in the future, but the future's getting closer to now. But it's due a week in 2 days. If you want to turn it in early, you have until this Friday. You can turn it in this Friday, and that'll get you the extra points on that one if you want. And then you're good to go. And then the narrative speeches will continue on Thursday. We'll finish out the rest of those the same day as our iStuff practice test. Alright, let's see what thinking is still inside of your noggins to help you out and see if the white sheet comes back in there. Jovial. And what Greek god do we get jovial from? Zeus. Zeus, because what's his Roman name?
Jupiter.
This is where you guys just read it straight from the blue sheet without actually listening to the question, wasn't it? Yeah, all the time. Nicely done, because Zeus and his Roman name was, what was it?
Jupiter.
Jupiter, but his other Roman name, because Jupiter is not going to help us out with this one. There you go, Jove. He had two names because he was twice as important. And so the idea, this is where jovial is happy, which is ironic because Zeus spends most of his time not being happy, but he was on top of the world, so it's sort of that same idea. And then we get to one that makes a bit more sense, cereal, which comes from Demeter, whose Roman name is? This is where that white sheet comes in handy because I have one listing of names right there in front of you. Are you serious? Their Roman name was Ceres, and so she was the god of what?
Agriculture. Food.
Grains and harvest and growing and hugging corn.
Agriculture.
And she's the one over yonder throwing her gang signs. Then the ones over yonder there. And so cereal would be cereal is food that comes from?
Grain.
Because it comes from the god of grains. And so cereal is food from grains. Volcano comes from?
His name is Vulcan.
Just making sure we can pronounce his name correctly. Didn't do too poorly there. Hephaestus. I don't have to slap too many of you. His Roman name was? Vulcan. And why is the volcano named after Hephaestus?
Because that's where he lives.
He lives in a mountain.
What did he do in the mountains?
He was going fire.
He played the drums. Good job. That's why his parents made him. He was like, you play too many drums. He's like, I gotta rock out. And so Hephaestus with the Vulcan, nicely done. And then sometimes when you rock out on your drums, you're like, and it explodes the top of the mountain because that's rock and roll, baby, or something like that. And that brings in the forge with the banging and the anvil and I don't know, dropping on rabbits or road runners or something. Mountain of fire, Mercurial. And Mercurial comes from? Hermes, whose Roman name was?
Mercury.
Nicely done, that one.
Able to change quickly.
And then able to, and so he's the one once again over yonder. And so, what was he, or who was he the god of? Messenger was his job. Thieves.
Stealing.
Merchants. Stealing, stuff like that. And then Mercurial means to change quickly. Well done. That's why there's a soccer shoe named Mercurial because it allows you to change direction quickly when you're out there on the field. Like that. Same thing. And then you get to the caduceus staff thing he's carrying in his hand up there. And with the caduceus staff, what did it allow him to do?
Heal people.
It allowed him to heal people, which is why who uses the caduceus staff symbol today?
Ambulances, hospitals.
Even though they cut off the wings and cut off the snakes, and now instead of the snakes going back and forth with the wings, it's just one stick and a snake. I think that's ASL for stick and snake. Something like that. From all my mini endeavors teaching ASL. Brush.
I saw one of those. We were driving. I was like, oh, I saw it. I was like, wait, do it. But then I was sitting with the globetrotter friend, so she didn't understand.
No, Globetrotters never understand anything. They live a life of ignorance. Fatal! And then fatal comes from?
Death.
The face.
And it means death rate.
Not just yelling death. What happens to some of you? How many fates were there?
3.
What did the first sister do?
She
says the word she a lot. She. Good. And so the string, and what's the second sister do? And then the third sister? Once again, the cutting. When the cutting of the string happens, what happens to the person?
They're born. They come out.
That's the borning, not the dying. And so keep that in mind. That's when the bornification happens. And so if you have a fatal accident, your string is up. And so what has happened to you?
You die.
That's when the dying happens. Even the Titans were thought to have strings and stuff like that. And so we had the measuring and the stick. I think we covered all those good things. And then we got to Iris. And with Iris it comes from?
Iris.
Rainbow. What god? Iris. And Iris, what was her job?
Rainbow.
Okay, you can say rainbow. That's her job.
Good job. Once again, I just don't listen to questions. And so Iris, your job was not being a rainbow. Her job was to be a messenger. She just happened to also leave a rainbow trail behind her. I would also accept her profession of snitch, because she was a professional snitch. Because who did she work for? Hera. And then who did she snitch on? Zeus the whole time. And then when do we see? Did we get to the little rainbow thing in the story?
No.
We
Tell
didn't?
them. Lucky charms.
Let's ruin rainbows for you then.
Yeah.
So
Wait,
quickly,
you never showed us the definition.
that's what we're gonna do right now. It's the story.
Rainbow.
The learning's happening. All right. So Iris was the rainbow god. Her job was the messenger to help you out. With Greeks, God does not refer to gender. God refers to giant being that can stomp on you. So regardless if you're a boy or a girl, you're a god. The goddess was more of a 1970s thing about women's lib. So when I refer to them as gods, I'm not trying to attack women. It's just like saying a human and a humaness. You're just called humans. It's the way it is. So down, angry tigers. So back to Iris, who was the god, the messenger for Hera. Whenever she came down to Earth, there'd be a rainbow. But with rainbows, we don't always see rainbows when it rains. The weather has to be a certain way for we to see a rainbow. When do we see rainbows?
If you're
Raining and sunny. That's an important part of it. It has to be sunny out for us to see the rainbow. And that goes back to Greek mythology. It goes back to Zeus. With Zeus, he was married to Hera, and Zeus was a very friendly man. And he came down to Earth to make lots of friendships with many very friendly girls. And so whenever he came down to make his friendships, he would like to hide his friendliness because his wife disapproved of his friendships. Hopefully you're picking up on how we're talking now. And so whenever he came down to make a new friend, he would disguise his friendship by making a rain cloud appear above him, because being the god of weather and storms, he would go like, "Hey, I'm Zeus." He's like, "Oh, Zeus." He's like, "I know." He's like, rain cloud would appear right above where they were. That way when Hera would step out, she wouldn't be able to see him, and thus he wouldn't get in trouble, and he liked the not getting in trouble part. I mean, not as much as he liked making new friends, but whatever. And so he'd be down there making his friends. Problem is, Hera was not stupid. Hera would step out onto Mount Olympus' front porch, like, "It's so sunny, and what a beautiful day, and you can look, why is there a rain cloud over that house?" And she'd look down, and it'd be like just one rain cloud sitting over a house, like, not suspicious at all. "Iris!" And Iris would take off shooting down to Earth, and would then go and check on Zeus, and come back up, "Yeah, he's down there doing it again." Hera's like, "Rah!" And she'd come down there and slap him around, and all kinds of horrible things would happen. But that's why we would then see a rainbow, is because Iris was coming down to check on Zeus to figure out if she had to snitch on him. And then would shoot back up again, which is why you would then see that rainbow. So now, whenever you see a rainbow when you're driving around, and you have your mom like, "Oh, it's such a pretty sight, I get it." Zeus. And you realize that now every time you see a rainbow, Zeus is making a new friend. And that is how you ruin rainbows for children. And so Iris was the rainbow god working for Hera. Now there's two definitions of what an iris is. One you have with you today. Not the entire eyeball, part of the eyeball.
It is the whole. The colorful part.
We name it the colorful part of your eyeball after the god of the rainbow, because there are different colors of the different eyeballs. They named that. Well, actually, lots of parts of your body are going to come from Greek mythology as we get farther into it, but the colored part of your eyeball comes from because of the color rainbow person. The other one, do you guys know what the other iris is?
The god.
It's a flower. Nicely done.
That's what I.
Good job.
And so the iris, the flower, looks like this. And it comes in a whole bunch of different colors. Now the problem is, There's a whole bunch of other flowers that come in a whole bunch of different colors. Why did they pick this one to be called the one after the rainbow god? I have no idea. They just hated those other flowers. But for some reason they picked this one, like, that was named after the rainbow god. What about those colorful flowers?
This one grows on
I like those
rainbows.
flowers. And they just like walked on from there. And then also a giant eyeball. I just took a picture of my eye. I thought that'd be easier on you.
Wow, that's eyelashes.
That has mascara.
I feel very
good
pretty.
eyelash.
That has eyeliner on it, unless you're goth.
This part right here in the middle is called.
Jeez.
Ouch. This part is called your pupil. This is the.
Iris.
This is the.
Eyeball.
The white part. Nailed it. It's actually called the sclera. For those of you who want to. I figured we're naming the other parts. Might as well throw a little bit of education at you. I'm not going to expect you to know that, but maybe someday when you hear sclera again, you'll be like, sclera, rainbows, oh, now I'm sad again. And like it'll be all of a sudden like a whole thing's coming flying back to you. So.
Yay.
I'm planning now on ruining future happy times for you. So that's why I'm music and museum.
Where's this?
It's ooh, good guess. Actually, it was people who worked for Apollo. And so they were connected to him, but not actually directly from him. Lorenzo? Muses.
Where is this?
Correct. Now, with muses, who are the muses, Lorenzo?
They're the people who represent all the artisty stuff in the human world.
Would work. You know how many of them there were?
9.
Nice.
Yeah, I knew that.
The muses, there were 9 of them that controlled all of the artisty stuff in the world. The way it works in Greek mythology is there are these 9 muses who were these titans who ran around doing artisty things. The reason there were 9 is each one had their own area to control. There was a muse of dance, a muse of poetry, a muse of sculpting, a muse of singing, a muse of banjo playing. And there are like all these different muses that were out there. The Greeks believed that humans, by nature, did not have the ability to do artistic things because we are made from mud, which is the story that we'll get to here coming up. And because we're made from mud, we have no natural artistic ability. If we were to give Holly a paintbrush, like, Holly, go paint a picture, the Greeks believed you would just walk up like, and just slap the paintbrush against it, and that's the best that a human could do. But Mr. Brodiak, I've seen beautiful works of art. You have, and that's because of the muses. And the way it worked for the Greeks is the muses, if they suddenly decide that Holly was worthy of having some beautiful work of art, the muse would step up behind her and work her like a puppet. Take a hand, boom, like cram it right inside of her and like work her like, and she would sit there and do like this little painting thing. It was only happening because the muse was controlling you. And the muse would then pull back out, like pulling your hand out of a glove, like going like, oh, that was weird. And then you continue on. If you've seen the movie Ghostbusters, they have Slimer that like flies through things and leaves. They believe the muses were the same way. Once the muse has controlled Holly and then pulls their hand back out, it leaves a little muse goo left inside of her that thus allows her to keep doing all these wonderful things. Once you've been inspired by the muse, it keeps going with you. Although eventually they worry like eventually you run out of it, and that's why you get like writer's block and you have issues, is because your muse is no longer inspiring you. So if you were to play sound and it was inspired by the muses, it doesn't come from you, it was sound that came from the muses. So they would call it music. Pretty sound inspired by muses. If we had all of these great works of art inspired by the muses and collected them into a building, that was not a collection of things created by humans, it was the things created by muses. So you called it a museum. Because it was all things collected and created by the muses. And so the 9 of them would go around and inspire people. And they did work for Apollo. He was sort of their boss and sent them out there because he was sort of the god of artwork and things like that. Which is weird because we're going to get to Athena, who's the god of arts and crafts, but that's a whole other thing that we're going to get to also. June! Urge?
Hera.
Why Hera?
Because her Roman name is Juno.
Good, nice. Like the movie, actually, there's a reason for that movie too. Which connects to Greek mythology. Everything connects to Greek. Hera, married to Zeus, her Roman name was Juno. Ooh, and what is she the god of?
Death.
Death, no. Almost the same thing.
Marriage and childbirth.
Marriage,
I got that
childbirth,
first.
and irony. although not irony by choice, irony because of what happens. So being the god of marriage, she was the one that you would pray to if you wanted to have a good marriage, which is where the irony comes in, because she had pretty much the worst marriage in all of Greek mythology. Because who's she married to?
Zeus.
What does he spend all of his time doing?
Making
Making friends.
Making rain
And so
clouds.
he was a very friendly person, and so because of that, she spends most of her time hating her marriage and hating her husband, and be like, why choices? Oh, you want to have a good marriage? Pray to me. Like, but you don't set a good example. Pray to me! Like, okay. And so because of that, she did not set good examples. The other thing she was the god of was babies and childbirth. Also ironic, because what does she spend most of her time doing?
Trying to kill the baby.
Trying to kill babies. Why? Because her husband keeps making friends. And there kept being all these new babies down there. So she kept on like, oh, there's another one. Oh, there's another one. They're everywhere. And she kept trying to get rid of all these babies because of her husband. So she spends most of her time trying to get rid of babies. But she's like, oh, do you want to have a god of babies? That's me. Like, but you've got to stick with babies on the end. Pay no attention to that. And so that was one of her many, many issues. Well, yeah, Greeks have issues. We're just getting started. Which, by the way, there is a movie called Juno, Juno, and that movie is about
Juno
A
Beach.
high schooler who gets pregnant.
a high school girl who gets pregnant. And so why is it called that? Because, oh, God, of pregnant mom. And so the whole thing connects to the connections, and of course, that happened. But with that, women, when they wanted to get married, would oftentimes pick a time of year when it was no longer rainy, and the weather was nice, and it was sunny out, and you could always rely upon this certain time. And so they started calling this time of year the time of Juno. And eventually shortened that from the time of Juno to just June. Because June becomes known as the month of?
June.
More weddings happen in June than the other 11 months combined. June is just the time where most people get married. I got married during June, not because of Greek mythology, but because I wasn't going to argue with my wife. She was like, we're going to get married in June. I'm like, yes, we are. And so that's how things worked out. And then later on, I was like, oh, that's why, because the gods told us to. We sacrificed to them, or whatever happens. June, irony, babies on sticks. All right, covered most of that one. But we're going to get more to babies on sticks coming up shortly. That's why tomorrow's story is called How to Dispose of Ugly Babies.
Eating
And that's a whole different set of gods. Strong.
I know it.
You ready for the next one?
Yeah.
More learning. Strong.
Athena or Minerva.
Athena, and Roman name Minerva. What's she the god of?
With 7 arts and crafts.
And one other thing, too.
Warfare.
Nicely done.
Athena.
Athena, whose Roman name was Minerva, was the god of wisdom and the god of war. Also one of the gods of arts and crafts along with Apollo, and we'll get to more of her arts and crafty things. She is the one that's over yonder with our weird picture of it. Looks like a giant horse and a midget, but it's not. It's supposed to be she's far away and the horse is up close. And so that's in there. The Pallas Athena, when it says Pallas in front of it, in Greek mythology, Pallas was a friend of hers, was a human who fought with her for years and years, and she was very impressed with how honorable he was and how well he fought. And then one day he died in battle right next to her. And so to honor him, she took his name and called herself Pallas Athena, just sort of like to keep his name going after that. So in late Greek mythology, she changes her name from just Athena to Pallas Athena. She's also the one that's over yonder above Diruk, who's up there, and then she's the one over here in that same area. By the way, you'll notice on her shield here is a picture of an owl. It goes back to our motifs, because what does the owl represent? And what was she the god of? So that's where all the learning comes into and stuff like that. Tailby.
Is Ares also the god of war?
Now, there is a second god of war. If only I had not called on you, the very next thing we were going to talk about was our other god of war, which is? Ares is our second god of war. There were 2 gods of war. The reason being is the Greeks believe there are 2 types of war. Honorable war and dishonorable war. Honorable war was Athena, where you want to use strategy, plan things out, figure out the best way to go about doing things, make sure your sides are even. You want to make sure the best victor is the person who puts the most time and thought into it. And then you have the other kind of war, where you go, hey, look over there, and when they turn around, you stab them in the back and kick them in the back of the knee, and like hit them with a goat. And you're like, rah! And you run away before they get back up. The other type of war is Ares, which is all about, I don't care how I win, as long as you're on the ground and I'm standing on top of you. Ares was not honorable. Ares was not a good person. He was very mean, did not get along with the other gods. Was also a wuss and a bully, got into fights with humans, would get beat up by humans, would go back to Mount Olympus and cry. Other gods thought he was a horrible person. He was also incredibly good looking, and so because of that, girls had crushes on him because
He looks like a
hashtag
vampire.
issues.
Friendly.
And so
It's
they
friendship.
had all kinds of friendship. But back to mind with Athena, we're going to get into the story of why Athena becomes the god of the mind. So quick story time.
He's next to us.
Shortly after, Zeus and Hera got married, and they're up on Mount Olympus. Zeus decides to celebrate his new marriage in the way that every guy does, by getting a girlfriend. And so Zeus goes out and he finds himself a girl by the name of Mycenae, the goddess of memory. And he and Mycenae hang out, and things go wonderfully for a long time. He's like, hey, you can't tell my wife about this because women. She's like, what? He's like, shh, don't worry about it. And so they hang out. Years go by, friendly times, until one day she goes, hey, Zeus, I've got great news. He's like, what's up? She goes, I'm pregnant. He goes, I thought you said great news. She goes, what? He goes, nothing. And he realizes this is not good because now there's evidence of his friendships. And we don't want to have evidence of his friendships because Hera would definitely disapprove of that. So he decides it's time to dispose of this evidence. And so he goes, oh, that's wonderful. I'm so happy. We should celebrate. And she goes, yeah, what are we going to do? He goes, let's go for a picnic in a deserted area of the woods where no one can interrupt us and we'll have time alone together. She goes, that's wonderful, not suspicious at all. And he goes, I agree. And so he packs a little picnic basket of like sandwiches and some water, and some Gatorade, and some Fritos. And they go on, because he's not good at packing picnics, and they go on their picnic out to this deserted area of the woods, and they're laughing and giggling and having a good time eating all of their food. When they get towards the end of the picnic, and he goes, hey, had a wonderful time. She goes, I have too. And he goes, I think we should play a game. She goes, I love games. He goes, I do too. She goes, what game should we play? He goes, let's play a game called Who Can Turn Into the Smallest Animal? She goes, how do you play? He goes, it's in the title. You turn into a small animal. The Greeks believed the gods were a lot like animorphs. You could just and then turn into like really small creatures whenever you wanted to, then just roam around on Earth. And they could turn into whatever creature they wanted to, whenever they wanted to. So anytime you saw any animal, it could be a god at any time. That was always one of the worries that they had. So he goes, let's see who can just take turns turning into smaller and smaller creatures, and it'll be a fun game. She's like, okay. He goes, I'll go first. He's like, boom, and turns into an elephant. She's like, oh, that's easy. She's like, boom, turns into a rhinoceros. And they start giggling and slapping each other as people in love do. And they keep going smaller into like moose, and then to a cow, and then into a horse, and then into something smaller than a horse, and then to a dog, and then a cat. And they keep giggling and laughing and going smaller, and then back and forth. And she turns into a grasshopper, and he's like, I got that beat. Turns into a fly, and he's buzzing around. He's like, fly, 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 fly. She goes, whatever. I can beat a fly. Zink, and turns into a little tiny gnat. And starts flying around him. She's like, you're never going to beat flying around like this. He goes, turns back into human form. She buzzes around his head. She's like, how are you going to beat this? He goes, ooh, that's a tough one. Like this. She goes, what? And he grabs her out of the air, takes her, throws her into his mouth, and swallows. And then she goes down to his stomach. And apparently, Greek physiology says, once you're in a god's stomach, you can't leave again. And so she is stuck down there. He has now gotten rid of all evidence of her existence, packs up the picnic again, goes back up to Mount Olympus. When people ask about Mycenae, he's like, Minsa who? I don't remember her at all. And then they point out the irony of her being the god of memory. He's like, I don't understand irony. But she's gone, never seen again. Years go by, and he's gotten completely away with this, no one having any idea. He becomes the whole king of Mount Olympus, goes all filling all the thrones, eventually has his son Hephaestus, throws Hephaestus off the mountain, Hephaestus comes back, years go by, and he's wandering around Mount Olympus when he starts getting a horrible headache. Thumping, thump, thump, feels like someone punching him in the brain over and over again. He's like, oh, my brain! He stumbles around like knocking vases off the tables. He's like, help me! And the other guy's like, what can we do? He's like, give me Tylenol. Like, we haven't invented that. He's like, no! Flips over a table in front of them. He's like, what can I do? I'm like, well, the best we can offer is your son Hephaestus. He's invented a new way of solving headaches, but I'm not sure you're going to like it. And Zeus goes, well, does it work? And they're like, we've never tried it, but you're welcome to. He's like, all right, I'll go down there. Well, part of the issue is Hephaestus is not happy with Zeus because Zeus is the one that crippled him for life, which is a story that we're going to get to coming up on Friday, throwing him out of a window of his building and stuff like that. And so Hephaestus has a wee bit of a sore spot towards his dad. So when Zeus comes, I was like, hey, Heffy, that was his nickname for him. He's like, Heffy, I've got this horrible headache, the thumpy, thumpy, thumpy. He's like, I've been told that you have a way of solving it. Can you help me with my headache? Hephaestus goes, well, I do have a new method, but I don't know if you're going to like it. Zeus is like, well, if it solves it, I'll take it, whatever it is. He goes, how does it work? And Hephaestus goes, well, you come over to this chair, and then I'm going to have you lean your head as far forward as possible. Zeus goes, yeah. And Hephaestus goes, and then I take out this axe, and then I take the axe, and I whack it into the top of your head as hard as I can, wiggle it back and forth, pull the axe back out, reach into your head and pull out what's ever giving you a headache. Zeus goes, that's genius, okay. He just goes, like, all right, make it fast. And Hephaestus is like, oh, okay. This is going to hurt you more than me. Zeus goes, what? He goes, nothing. Whack! Right in the top of Zeus's head, gives it a wiggle, wiggly, 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 and then pulls out the axe. Zeus stands up, he's like, oh, what do you see? And he's like, ooh, a gooey thing. He's like, but he starts like poking inside there, and he's like, I'm not sure what it is. And like pokes Zeus's brain, Zeus's leg shoots out to one side. He's like, oh, that's kind of fun. All of a sudden, from Zeus's brain, jumps out this little person. Pew! Hephaestus is like, ah! Screams like a little girl and jumps back. And this little person lands in front of them, wearing full armor. It's a girl. And like the little shrinky dinks, like you can put like in the little pills you put in the water, like it turns into a dinosaur that you can buy from the great. Same thing happens. The girl hits the ground like and grows up to full size in front of them. This person is Athena. And she goes, my name is Athena. I am your daughter. And Zeus goes, I don't have a daughter named Athena. Why were you in my brain? She goes, well, first, his brain closes back up. She goes, my mother was Mincine, and you ate her years ago. And she gave birth to me inside of you, and I've lived all of these years inside of you until I made my way to your brain. When I was on your brain, I decided it was time to make my own armor, because that's what women do. And I decided to create my own armor, and I made my own forge, and I banged out my own armor, and thus I popped out. And so because she was on his brain, she becomes known as the god of wisdom. Because she was making her own armor, she's the god of war. And that's how Athena becomes both the god of wisdom and the god of war. And your mind is just your thinker bits. And so that's where Athena comes in. Yeah.
What happened to the Mincini?
Never seen again. She's just gone. Apparently, I don't know, once swallowed in there, she didn't exit through the brain. I mean, why didn't you ask where does a forge come from on a brain?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I have no idea. Apparently, lots of minerals in the bloodstream, but she just kept clean. She's like, there's a mineral, there's a mineral, there's a mineral. You've got me. The more you try to apply logic to these stories, the more it's going to hurt your brain. Yeah.
Oh, well.
Trying to apply logic?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably not going to roll well.
But if you're a god and you turned into an animal,
Yeah.
and then if someone like hunted you and cut your head off, would you be dead?
No.
No.
No. Good try. You had plans, didn't
Just be
you?
a kid.
Why did it?
Tomorrow, we're going to finish out the last one and get to our story about disposing of ugly babies.
Mincini was funny.